King Edward VII met a tragic and agonising end on the 6th of May 1910 within the confines of Buckingham Palace. Despite his reign lasting over 9 years, his lifestyle choices were far from healthy. As the successor to Queen Victoria's throne following her lengthy reign and subsequent passing, he had been the Prince of Wales for nearly 6 decades. Throughout his life he indulged in the high society circles, frequently visiting country estates on weekends for extravagant parties, earning him a reputation as a playboy prince with numerous mistresses. However, the consequences of his lifestyle choices caught up with him, and at the age of 68, the King and Emperor of India suffered a grueling demise. What exactly led to the King's death, and what were the contributing factors? Upon Queen Victoria's death, Edward ascended the throne as the King of the United Kingdom and Emperor of India, ruling over the British dominions. He opted to reign under the name Edward VII, choosing not to tarnish his father's name out of respect. His coronation was scheduled for the 26th of June 1902, but at that time the King's health was ailing. In his late 50s, just 2 days prior to the coronation, he was diagnosed with a condition that could have contributed to his eventual death. Appendicitis, a perilous ailment in those days, when surgery lacked modern advancements, posed a significant threat to his life. The surgical procedure to remove the appendix was far from foolproof, carrying a considerable risk. Despite being the king, he had yet to be crowned, and there was a chance that Edward VII might not survive. Fortunately, renowned surgeon Sir Frederick Trevors and antiseptic pioneer Lord Lister successfully performed a life-saving operation on the king, draining a pint of pus from the infected abscess on his appendix. The procedure involved a small incision of around 4.5 inches through the king's tissue and abdominal wall. One fortunate aspect was that the surgeons determined it was not cancerous, and the day after the surgery the king was sitting up in bed smoking a cigar, and within 2 weeks he was deemed out of danger and his surgeons were richly rewarded. Edward VII was eventually crowned around 5 weeks later on the 9th of August 1902. As a monarch, Edward VII took pleasure in his role within the British society and international politics. He relished the elaborate costumes and ceremonial events in which he regularly participated. He was considered a trendsetter, popularising tweeds, dinner jackets, and a particular style of hat during this time. However, he also had a penchant for a wilder lifestyle, and known for his extravagant breakfast consisting of an assortment of lavish foods, he indulged in opulent banquets each morning. Additionally, he maintained a series of mistresses throughout his life, indicating a strong affinity for female companionship. He famously referred to his wife as his brood mare, while regarding his mistresses as his hacks. During a wordplay on a previous monarch's name, he earned the moniker Edward the Caresser. His relationship with his mother, Queen Victoria, was often strained as she disapproved of his behaviour and choices. Despite his initial health scare and controversial personal life, King Edward VII managed to reign with enthusiasm and impact. His contributions as a peacemaker and his efforts to modernise the military remain notable, even though his reign was relatively short-lived. Edward VII's death marked the end of an era and the commencement of the King George V's reign. Although his lifestyle choices ultimately played a role in his demise, his legacy as a monarch endures. He frequently clashed with his mother during her reign as queen, and she disapproved of his behaviour and numerous mistresses, which starkly contrasted the loyal nature of his father, Prince Albert. Victoria also held Edward responsible for her husband's death, as Albert had been travelling to confront him about his mistresses and philandering. It was during this journey that Albert fell ill with a cold from which he would never recover, and during his coronation, medical personnel were present to assist Edward VII in fulfilling his duties. Still in recovery from surgery, he was unable to perform certain traditional rituals that had been part of the ceremony for centuries. Throughout his life, Edward VII was an avid smoker, consuming 20 cigarettes and 12 cigars every day. He also suffered from a radium ulcer, a form of cancer near his nose, which was treated with radium in 1907. As his final years approached, he visibly struggled with bronchitis, exacerbated by his heavy smoking habit. In February 1909, while on a state visit in Germany, Edward experienced a momentary loss of consciousness, causing widespread panic. And despite this episode, he carried on. However, in March 1910, while in France, he collapsed once again, and it became evident to many that Edward VII was gravely ill and likely had little time left. He stayed in France for a period to recover, but the true extent of the king's deteriorating health remained concealed. Some in England criticised him for remaining in France as a political crisis unfolded back home. 6 weeks later, he made the journey back to Buckingham Palace, still suffering from severe bronchitis. His wife and consort Alexandra of Denmark had been visiting her brother, the King of Greece, in Corfu, and upon her return on the 6th of May 1910, Edward VII, while recovering in the palace, experienced several severe heart attacks. The royal doctors urged him to rest and recover, but the king defiantly replied, "No, I shall not give in. I shall go on. I shall work until the end." Aware that his death was imminent, he drifted in and out of consciousness, and his son, the Prince of Wales, visited him at the time and informed him that the king's horse, named the Witch of the Air, had won a race at Kempton that afternoon. Edward responded, "Yes, I have heard of it. I am very glad," which is considered his final words. He lost consciousness for the last time and was put to bed. 15 minutes later, the royal doctors pronounced the passing of Edward VII, aged 68, inside Buckingham Palace, the very place of his birth. Alexandra, the king's wife, plunged into deep mourning and refused to allow her husband's body to be moved. However, she permitted small groups of visitors to pay their respects, and on the 11th of May, the king was dressed in his uniform and placed inside a grand oak coffin. 8 days after his demise, the coffin was transferred to the throne room, sealed and placed on public display as part of the lying in state tradition. In each corner of the casket, a guardsman stood vigilantly, overseeing the body, while King George V had already ascended to the throne. The preparations for the funeral were already in progress, and upon seeing her husband's remains, Alexandra remarked on their remarkable preservation. It was observed that the king appeared peacefully asleep. On the morning of 17th of May, the casket containing Edward VII's body was placed upon a gun carriage, drawn by sombre black horses, and solemnly transported to Westminster Hall. The new king, accompanied by the royal family and Edward's beloved terrier Caesar, walked behind the carriage. A brief service took place, after which the royal family departed, and the doors of Westminster Hall were opened, allowing a staggering 400,000 individuals to pass by and pay their respects to the late king. The funeral ceremony was held on the 20th of May 1910, and it was hailed as the grandest gathering of royalty and nobility ever assembled in one place, and of its kind the last. A royal train carried the king's casket from London to Windsor Castle, where he was laid to rest within St. George's Chapel, alongside many other monarchs. Despite his relatively short reign, spanning less than a decade, King Edward VII was revered as a peacemaker, harbouring concerns that his nephew, the German Emperor, would propel Europe into a devastating war. 4 years after Edward's passing, World War I erupted, and the efforts he had made in reorganising the armed forces and navy proved invaluable during the conflict. As a monarch, he surpassed expectations, yet his accession occurred when he was already beyond the average life expectancy, leaving little time for him to fully establish his reign. However, he took great care to ensure that his successor, George V, would be better prepared for the task. The king's health had been ailing, plagued by lung and appendix issues, and while pneumonia was officially attributed as the cause of his demise, it was evident that his lifestyle choices had taken a toll on his well-being. Known for his lavish parties, heavy smoking, and multiple mistresses, these factors, coupled with his pre-existing health conditions, ultimately contributed to his passing. The death of King Edward VII marked the conclusion of an era and the dawn of a new reign under King George V, and his legacy as a peacemaker and his endeavours to modernise the military continue to be remembered, despite the brevity of his time on the throne. The death of Prince Alfred. Deep within the enchanted walls of a German castle, the fateful month of July in the year 1900 cast a gloomy shadow upon Prince Alfred, the second son of Queen Victoria. Grievously afflicted by a merciless bout of throat cancer, his life teetered on the edge. Yet the cruel hands of destiny had already dealt him a heavy blow the year prior, when his young son of only 24 years old perished under suspicious circumstances. Prince Alfred, often overlooked throughout history, held the distinguished position of Queen Victoria's fourth child and second son. Though destined to reside third in line to the throne, his prodigy would ascend to become queens and rulers in their own right. However, the devastating demise of this beloved prince plunged Queen Victoria into profound sorrow, adding an unbearable weight upon her weary shoulders, for her herself would pass from this world a mere year later. Now let us delve into the harrowing tale of the tragic demise of Queen Victoria's cherished son. On a momentous day, the 6th of August in the year 1844, the grand halls of Windsor Castle welcomed the arrival of Prince Alfred, affectionately known as Alfie. As fate would have it, he assumed the second spot in line of succession, trailing only his esteemed elder brother Edward VII, the Prince of Wales. In accordance with tradition, he received a regal baptism, solidifying his position as the second in line to ascend the British throne. However, as the tides of time carried on, his status waned as his brother Edward and his wife Alexandra of Denmark ushered forth their firstborn son, Prince Albert Victor. Alas, Prince Alfred would be further displaced in the line of succession, as his brother welcomed more offspring into the world. Nevertheless, during his tender years, he embarked upon a maritime adventure, setting sail in the Royal Navy at the tender age of 12. His unwavering dedication and prowess saw him excel, passing examinations with flying colours, to become a naval cadet at the age of 14. His voyages took him aboard numerous majestic vessels, and he traversed foreign lands, gracing them with his regal presence during official visits. However, destiny had a different plan in store for Prince Alfred, when in 1862 the King of Greece abdicated and Alfred was selected as his successor. Unfortunately, the British government intervened, opposing Queen Victoria's stance on the matter. Plans were already underway for Alfred to assume the role of the Duke of Saxe-Coburg, a vision Queen Victoria had specifically tailored just for him. Despite this setback, Alfred remained devoted to his naval career and continued to ascend the ranks. His remarkable talent for fleet management earned him high praise, with many considering him a top-notch admiral and exceptional leadership skills. In 1866 he was bestowed the title of the Duke of Edinburgh, which marked the beginning of his remarkable voyage around the globe. During his grand expedition, he embarked on a journey that took him to various countries, including Australia, where he became the first member of the royal family to grace its shores. Alfred's presence was met with great enthusiasm, and he spent approximately 5 months immersing himself in the Australian experience. However, amid this momentous visit, a grave incident unfolded that had the potential to claim his life and profoundly impact his well-being. It was on the 12th of March 1868, while in Sydney, that Alfred attended a charitable event held in a beachfront suburb to raise funds for the Sydney Sailors' Home. Tragically, amidst the festivities, he fell victim to an assassination attempt when Henry James O'Farrell fired a revolver, piercing the prince's back to the right of his spine. Swift action was taken as 6 dedicated nurses tirelessly cared for him around the clock over a period of 2 weeks. During the chaotic struggle, a brave individual managed to disarm O'Farrell after he continued firing at the prince. Justice prevailed when O'Farrell was subsequently executed for his heinous crime. After recovering from his injury, Alfred resumed his command of the ship and embarked on further voyages that took him to captivating destinations like Hawaii and New Zealand. His visit to New Zealand marked a significant milestone as he became the first member of the royal family to set on its shores. From there, he continued his travels to India, showcasing his value as an invaluable asset to Queen Victoria. Alfred proved himself to be a skilled and accomplished statesman on the international stage. Queen Victoria had long harboured intentions of arranging a marriage between Alfred and Princess Dagmar of Denmark. However, due to political tensions between European countries, the Queen's plans were thwarted. It was during a visit to his sister Princess Alice that Alfred encountered a fateful meeting with Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrova of Russia. On the 23rd of January 1875, Alfred exchanged vows with Maria, who held the distinguished title of being the second and sole surviving daughter of Emperor Alexander II of Russia. With their marriage, Alfred and Maria assumed the titles of Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh and made their way to London. However, their union was not a blissful one, and it is believed that Alfred's wife became excessively preoccupied with assimilating into London's socialite circles, causing a strain in their relationship. Alfred's dedication to his naval career remained unwavering, as he commanded various ships and steadily climbed the ranks. On the 18th of October 1887, he achieved the esteemed position of Admiral. Not only that, but he also held the prestigious role of the Commander-in-Chief of the Navy, later ascending to the rank of Admiral of the Fleet. His exceptional skills as Commander-in-Chief were widely recognised, with many considering him unparalleled in his ability to handle a fleet, implementing significant advancements in signalling and manoeuvring. Alfred's passion for gunnery was evident, and he took a keen interest in this field. Among the remarkable vessels he oversaw, one that particularly stood out was the Duke of Edinburgh's, which was hailed as the most aesthetically pleasing ship ever encountered. Following the passing of his uncle, Alfred assumed the title of the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Although he relinquished his British allowance, seat in the House of Lords, and membership of the Privy Council, he retained Clarence House as his residence in London. As he ventured to the duchy, he was initially perceived as a foreigner. However, as time progressed, Alfred's amiable nature and contributions endeared him to the people of the duchy, ultimately earning their widespread popularity and support. However, a dark cloud loomed over Alfred's family when his son, Alfred, became embroiled in a scandal in 1899. Tragically, in January of that same year, he allegedly took his own life. The distressing event occurred during the celebration of Alfred and Maria's 25th wedding anniversary, but their son was conspicuously absent. Prior to the unfortunate incident, he had been under the care of the family at their residence before being sent to a sanatorium, where he eventually passed away. This devastating loss undoubtedly had a profound impact on Alfred's life, casting a shadow over his emotions and well-being. Adding to the sorrow, Alfred himself battled deteriorating health, succumbing to the grips of throat cancer, and in a sudden and unexpected turn of events, paralysis of the heart seized him, and the Duke breathed his last breath. Queen Victoria, upon receiving the heartbreaking news of her son's demise, was overcome with profound grief and extended her heartfelt sympathy. As a testament to his memory, a memorial honouring Alfred was erected in the serene grounds of Balmoral. Prince Alfred's life was characterised by brilliance and distinction. His remarkable contributions as a member of the Navy and his unwavering commitment to his duties as a prince shone brightly. However, the untimely death from throat cancer cast a sombre note, claiming the life of Queen Victoria's second son and leaving a void that would be forever felt. Prince Arthur, Duke of Connaught in Strathearn. Prince Arthur was born on the 1st of May 1850. He was the seventh child and third son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. The prince was baptised by the Archbishop of Canterbury, John Bird Sumner, on the 22nd of June in the palace's private chapel. At his ceremony he was awarded his godparents, who were chosen as Prince William of Prussia, who would go on to become the King of Prussia and German Emperor Wilhelm I. His godmother was Princess Bernhard of Saxe-Weimar-Eisenach, who was his great-uncle's sister-in-law. His third godparent was the Duke of Wellington. This was the man that he was named after, as well as sharing a birthday with. All of the children of Victoria and Albert were under a strict education system, made up of a private tutor and rigorous schedules. Arthur was reported to have been one of the Queen's favourite children. Arthur's interests were elsewhere from his studies. He was always interested in the army and showed a keen interest in joining, so it came as no surprise that in 1866 he joined the Royal Military College at Woolwich. He was ambitious and he graduated only 2 short years later, where he was commissioned as a lieutenant in the Corps of Royal Engineers on the 18th of June 1868. A few short months later, he transferred to the Royal Regiment of Artillery on the 2nd of November 1868, before going on to join the Rifle Brigade the following year in August of 1869. This was nostalgically his father's own regiment, and after this he went on to pursue a long and successful career serving as an army officer. His travels took him all over the world, and he travelled from South Africa, Canada in 1869, Ireland, Egypt in 1882, and to India from 1886 to 1890. While in Canada, he began training in order to defend the Dominion from the Fenian raids. As a royal member, some people were concerned for his safety, but Arthur was determined to put duty first, regardless, and therefore he put himself in harm's way, and on the 25th of May 1870, he was engaged in fending off the Fenian invaders during the Battle of Eccles Hill, for which he received the Fenian Medal. During his time in Canada, he was entertained by those highest in society, and he was invited to attend many grand balls and garden parties. Among the prestigious events, he was also invited to the opening of Parliament in Ottawa. He was the first ever royal to do this. His adventures were well documented and sent back to his mother, the Queen, to view. As well as being part of many social events, Prince Arthur was also into the Six Nations, and he met with the chiefs of 6 nations of the Grand River of Mohawk Chapel in 1869. On the 1st of October 1869, he was given the title Chief of the 6 Nations in Ontario, allowing him to sit in the tribe's councils and vote on matters of tribe governance. Arthur became the 51st chief on the council, despite there being a rule that only 50 can be on the council. On his mother's birthday in 1874, Arthur was made into a royal peer, being titled as the Duke of Connaught and Strathearn and Earl of Sussex. A few years later, Arthur came into the direct line of succession to the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg in Gotha in Germany when his nephew died in 1899. He decided, however, to renounce his own and his son's succession rights to the duchy, which then passed to his other nephew, Prince Charles Edward, the posthumous son of Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany. In 1878, Arthur went to visit his eldest sister Victoria in Germany, and this is where he would meet his future wife, Louise Margaret of Prussia. Although Arthur was bedazzled by this woman, when he reported back to his mother of his interest in her, she was far from bemused. She did not want a scandal on her hands, and the princess's parents were involved in an unhappy and unpleasant marriage, and they lived apart. Not only this, she did not deem her good enough for her son, as she was very plain-looking with bad teeth. Victoria reported her dismay in her diary entries. Dear Arthur arrived and stopped with us while we were taking tea. Afterward remained talking with me a little while, and told me that he had taken a great liking to young Louise of Prussia, Fritz Karl's youngest daughter, who was brought up by an English governess. He said he did not wish to marry yet, and no one had breathed a word about it, but he liked her better and better, and meant, if I had no objection, to ask to see her this summer again. I could not help saying that I disliked the Prussians, and told him he should see others first, but he said it would make no difference. She then went on to explain how his happiness was important to her, and how sad that he looked that he would not go ahead with anything without her consent. Queen Victoria therefore gave her consent, and the decision was supported by Arthur's elder sister, who was overjoyed with her brother's choice. When Queen Victoria met with Princess Louise, it is reported that she began to feel excited by the pairing, and it was not long before an engagement was announced. Victoria described Louise as being a dear, sweet girl of charming character, and she clearly trusted her son's choice in a wife. The couple were married at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle on the 13th of March 1879. This was also the place that 4 more of Queen Victoria's children would marry, and is now a popular place for royals to wed. The couple went on to have 3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy. Their first was born in January of 1882, and she was called Princess Margaret Victoria Charlotte Augusta Nora. This was followed the following January in 1883 with a son called Prince Arthur Frederick Patrick Albert, before finally having their last child called Princess Victoria Patricia Helena Elizabeth, born 3 years later in the March of 1886. His family and children grew up in the Connaughts country home, Bagshot Park in Surrey, and after 1900 at Clarence House, the Connaughts London residence. Through his children's marriages, Arthur became the father-in-law of the Crown Prince Gustaf Adolf of Sweden, Princess Alexandra, Duchess of Fife, and Sir Alexander Ramsay. Arthur's first 2 children predeceased him, Margaret while pregnant with his 6th grandchild. At 2 o'clock in the morning on the Saturday of the 1st of May 1920, on Arthur's 70th birthday, Crown Princess Margaret died suddenly in Stockholm of blood poisoning. Her immune system had taken a knock when she had only shortly before suffered from measles, which then aggravated her ear. She had surgery to eliminate a mastoid, and the medical world was still a far cry away from the levels of cleanliness now, and she began to suffer from pain in her face and below her eye. The doctors performed another procedure, which only aggravated her symptoms and caused a skin infection under her right ear. It took only hours for the disease to take her life, and tragically she was 8 months pregnant with her 6th child. Prince Arthur, the Duke of Connaught and Strathern, passed away on the 16th of January in the year 1942. At that time he had reached the remarkable age of 91 years old, 8 months and 16 days. This poignant moment was made even more significant by the fact that he shared this very age with his elder sister, Princess Louise, Duchess of Argyll, who had departed from the world just 2 years and 1 month earlier. In honour of the Duke, a solemn funeral service was conducted at the prestigious St George's Chapel, which stands majestically within the historic Windsor Castle. This service took place on the 23rd of January, providing an opportunity for the family, friends and dignitaries to pay their respects. Following the service, the Duke's mortal remains were temporarily interred in the Royal Vault, located beneath the hallowed grounds of St George's Chapel, a place of immense historical significance within Windsor. However, this was not his final resting place, and on the 19th of March 1942, a poignant and dignified ceremony saw the Duke reburied in the Royal Burial Ground at Frogmore. This serene and picturesque burial ground has been the final resting place for many members of the British royal family. Prince Arthur's passing held special significance in the history of the British monarchy, for he was the last surviving son of Queen Victoria, who had reigned over the United Kingdom for an unprecedented 63 years, with his passing a direct link to one of the longest and most transformative reigns in British history came to a poignant end. As is customary, the Duke's will was sealed following his passing, a practice that helps maintain the privacy of the deceased's personal affairs. It's worth noting that the estate he left behind was valued at £150,677. When adjusted for inflation to the year 2022, this would be equivalent to approximately £4.9 million, a testament to his lifetime of service and dedication to the Crown and his country. Please continue to support my channel by subscribing. Of all of Queen Victoria and Albert's children, several historians believe that her youngest son, Prince Leopold, was the cleverest and the most interesting of all of the young royals. His short life was full of intrigue, drama, and a danger that was at the very heart of the British monarchy, despite him never being able to see the British throne. The 8th child and second youngest heir of the reigning Queen Victoria and her husband Prince Albert, little Leopold came into the world as something of a medical marvel. Queen Victoria had given birth 8 times, and she controversially used chloroform as a form of pain relief, which went against the status quo of the public at the time. It was a Christian belief at the time that women were supposed to suffer in childbirth, and if they interrupted this natural way of things, there might be divine consequences. Leopold came into the world happy and seemingly healthy, and the palace was full of relief. However, this relief did not last very long, as his health took a decline over the years. Victorian concepts of parenting are a lot different than our own today, but the royal household of Queen Victoria was bizarre by any standards. Victoria had outwardly reported how much she despised being both childbearing and large parts of child rearing, despite having a large brood of 9 children running around. As the 8th child, Leopold was often forgotten, and the impact of his birth on his mother may have led her to suffer from postpartum depression. And Leopold's father, Albert, wrote in a letter not long afterwards about Victoria's continuance of hysterics. Victoria played her children off against each other, and one way to do this was to put forward her favourite child over the others. Her alleged favourite was Prince Arthur, who she told her husband Prince Albert that out of all of her children, Arthur was dearer than any of the others put together. Leopold was always known to be a sickly boy, just like his father. He suffered greatly with anxiety, which led to a number of physical problems, such as indigestion, and no matter how much the palace fed him, he remained rail thin and weak. When he was a growing toddler, he started moving around, and he would bruise very easily and suffer major injuries at the smallest of falls. It wasn't long before Victoria and Albert searched for answers and came to a disturbing conclusion that his illness was a fatal one. A dark secret clouded the royal family whereby the males born to the many match-made couples that descended from Queen Victoria would suffer from a genetic disease called haemophilia, which prevents blood from clotting properly. Victoria had passed this on to her son, and suddenly the prince's dangerous falls and sickly disposition made all too much sense. Unfortunately for little Prince Leopold, the dangerous impacts of haemophilia manifest in men and not women, and it was soon very clear that the princeling was in fatal danger at all moments of the day. Victoria did worry constantly about his internal bleeding, and nobody believed that he would survive into adulthood. As well as this condition passed from his mother, medical professionals also believed that the prince was suffering from another illness. Leopold would suffer from fits, which led them to believe he had epilepsy, which at the time was a sign that he was cursed or bewitched. The family did not deal with his depositions very well, with his mother taking full control over his life. Queen Victoria was very protective of her son, and she kept him practically under lock and key, and from the moment he could crawl, he had a whole team of doctors constantly checking up on him and making sure that the royal didn't have a hair out of place. Leopold was only 8 years old when his father died in 1861. Albert was only 42 when the Grim Reaper came knocking, and his passing threw Queen Victoria into a notorious state of mourning. Prince Leopold had not only inherited his sickly disease from his mother, but he had also inherited her looks. His wide, heavy-lidded eyes, the set of his small mouth, and his oval face, as well as Victoria's light hair. As a male member of the monarchy, it was tradition for the princes to form part of the military, but due to his condition, his mother banned him from all military service, accepting some honorary positions that were merely symbolic. All of his brothers went on to have some form of military service, which must have been bittersweet for him to witness, and a massive downer to his ego, and something that likely humiliated the young Victorian man. So something had to give. Leopold could not be physical in any way, and so he turned his attention to his mental capabilities. The prince had the best tutors royalty could buy, but no less than the poet laureate Alfred. Lord Tennyson noted the boy's quick mind and immense capacity for learning. Despite being academically bright, this did not rid him of his rebellious nature. As a teenager, he began to grow tired of his mother's watchful and overbearing eye, and so he became a college boy. He had to beg and plead with Queen Victoria to let him attend the University of Oxford out in the world. Victoria finally relented when he was 19, and Leopold got a tiny taste of what independence felt like. Still feeling constrained by his mother's watchful eye, Leopold went to drastic measures to win his full freedom. He made the decision that getting married was his only hope of getting out, and he started his quest for a wife by looking around Europe for a royal bride. As a Prince of England, Leopold should obviously have no trouble at finding a wife, right? His secret illness was no longer a secret, which meant that unfortunately for Leopold, he wasn't exactly the most eligible bachelor. As a result, he went through a painful number of options, including the heiress Daisy Maynard and Princess Frederica of Hanover, but all of them rejected him for one reason or another. Then his meddling mother got involved in the matchmaking process and set him up on a blind date. She was actually extremely good at her matchmaking, and after watching him fail over and over again, she soon suggested that Leopold meet up with Princess Helena, the daughter of a German prince and one of Leopold's distant cousins. The German princess had a bad reputation in England for being frigid and distant, but the truth couldn't have been further from this gossip. She was the exact opposite. She loved being among the people. Helena was also very beautiful, and therefore she was absolutely perfect for Leopold. Princess Helena was unusually and shockingly educated for a woman of her time, as she could compete with her match on an intellectual level. She loved math and philosophy, and Leopold was impressed with her. He was completely delighted with her, and he even introduced Helena to his academic circle of friends from Oxford. Obviously, Helena impressed them mightily, because she continued lifelong friendships with the group. Leopold had a lovely, extravagant royal wedding, as you would expect for a prince of England. He didn't wait around, and he jumped right into matrimony with Helena, marrying her on April 27th, 1882. He was 29 years old, and she was 8 years his junior at just 21. The wedding was a royal fairy tale. Helena's train was a full 6 yards long and embroidered in silver. The service was performed by the Archbishop of Canterbury. As a nervous groom, and as one who was not used to the giant public displays of affection and publicity, Helena was clear and confident with her vows, but this cannot be said for Leopold. He mumbled his way through the service with not so distinctly audible answers. Unlike many of the arranged marriages of the past, especially in the royal family, Leopold did well to find true love with Helena. It has been reported that their marriage was blissful, with the married pair complementing each other well. Leopold was just happy to have gained his independence from his mother finally. They went on to produce children, and only a year later, his wife gave birth to his first child, Princess Alice, in 1883. Leopold was living with a curse, and he would pass his disease on to his daughter. As a female, she would not see the impact of haemophilia, but she would go on to become a royal carrier. Determined to grow their family, only a year later, the pair would go on to become pregnant again in 1884. They were in the prime of their lives. They were enjoying family time together with their daughter and their baby on the way. They envisioned a long, bright future together, raising little royals for Grandma Victoria. But unfortunately, Leopold's body had a different plan in store for him when it began to fail him. Leopold was approaching 30, but his royal blood disease was beginning to cause him joint pains during the cold and wintry English winters. His doctors urged him to seek better climates abroad away from his pregnant wife in Cannes, but this would be his ultimate undoing. Leopold was part of a large brood, and he particularly was close to Princess Louise, who was Queen Victoria's 6th child, and only 5 years older than Leopold. Louise was the rebel of the family, and when Leopold was still a child, she set him a particularly bad example when he was caught up in one of her scandals. It is rumoured that Princess Louise began an affair with Leopold's tutor, Walter Sterling, before falling in love and creating a secret love child that would be brought up by a non-royal family, but this was never proven. Leopold was only 14 years old at the time, but he already knew which side he was on. Leopold did not portray a rebellious boy, but he was a geeky guy with a cheeky side. When Queen Victoria dismissed Walter Sterling from royal service, Leopold still kept up a secret correspondence with the man. Despite living a marriage of bliss, it has been alleged that Leopold may have been set to marry another woman called Alice Liddell. She was the real-life inspiration for Alice's adventures in Wonderland, with some even suggesting that he named his daughter Alice after her. But others allege that he was not in love with Alice, but instead he was in love with her younger sister Edith, who was closer to his age. Alice served as a secret smokescreen for Leopold's undying devotion to Edith. If he was so in love with Edith, why did he not go on to marry her? The answer is a heartbreaking one. In 1876, when Leopold was failing in his quest for a bride, the young Liddell girl died from measles or peritonitis, which is inflammation of the abdomen. Leopold played his part in her funeral with a touching display of affection when he helped carry her coffin into the funeral procession. Queen Victoria lived in fear that her precious boy would be suddenly taken from her, and so she was overbearing and protected of him and his health. But as the years went on, she enjoyed the control she had over him and the fact that he relied on her so heavily. He was kept at her side, just how she liked it, before giving him a promotion to handle her affairs. When Leopold was a young adult, he became Queen Victoria's personal secretary, an unofficial position that his father Prince Albert had mostly held before his untimely passing. In some ways, Leopold's meticulous mind was ideal for this position, though it also pushed him to be concerned with court interests, something he was much less interested in. Leopold was a smart man. His time at Oxford was some of the best years of his life, where he made lifelong friends. He clinked glasses with celebrities like Oscar Wilde, John Ruskin and Lewis Carroll. While these were socially acceptable activities for a royal prince, he was also embroiled in a secret society that his brother introduced him to. The future King of England, Edward, who was notorious for his debauched behaviour and scandals. He was introduced into the notorious secret society, the Freemasons. Leopold was no lonely rank and file either. After all, Albert Edward was a worshipful master and the most senior member of the Oxford location. Following the advice of his doctors, Leopold left his pregnant wife behind to travel to, in February of 1884, in the hope to reduce his haemophilic symptoms. He was staying at the lovely Villa Nevada residence. He had been there for a month when disaster struck. While in his villa on March the 27th, he slipped and fell. This should have been a minor ordeal, but due to the prince's blood-clotting disease, when he hit his knee and banged his head, it was catastrophic. The prince had been reminded of the dangers of hurting himself, and how the tiniest of bruises and bang-ups could lead him severely injured or worse, and for good reason. This fall was devastating to the royal. His condition worsened over the coming hours, until in the early morning of March 28th, the prince never woke up. The culprit behind his untimely end was gruesome. He had done well to avoid this level of injury throughout his life, but his luck had finally run out. This small bang to his head had led to a fatal cerebral hemorrhage, which led to his death. In his tragic wake, he left destruction when his mother mourned him deeply. When Victoria heard of Leopold's passing, her response was absolutely heartbreaking. She had already suffered the loss of her dear Albert, as well as Leopold's older sister Alice, and she was beside herself with grief and loneliness, as she wrote in her journal. To lose another dear child far from me, and one who was so gifted, and such a help to me, is too dreadful. Then his wife was left alone, still pregnant at home and full of grief. She gave birth to the son he would never meet in that summer, Charles Edward, who would never know his father. His deadly disease was luckily not passed to his son, but that didn't mean that his family was safe. Leopold truly may have been cursed, and the curse did not end with his death. In the years after his death, his children and his wife suffered heart-wrenching fates. His first daughter Alice passed her haemophilia genes on to her eldest son Rupert, who then went on to die at the young age of 20 in a car accident, an event that his illness surely made worse. Yet Leopold's own son did more damage to his name when he lost his way. Growing up without a father figure is difficult, and little Charles Edward needed some guidance in his life. The man was not plagued by his father's royal disease, but he was plagued with the extremist ideologies when his son turned into a Nazi sympathiser, fighting on the German side in both World War I and World War II, before the English government stripped him of his titles for his participation. He became estranged in 1954. Charles Edward passed away while living in poverty. Leopold was the first known male royal in the British line to suffer from haemophilia, but he wasn't the last. The tragic tale of his legacy is infamous. One of Victoria's granddaughters was Princess Alex of Hesse, who was also a carrier of haemophilia, and she became Alexandra, the last Tsarina of Russia. Alexandra ended up passing on her haemophilia to her firstborn son, Alexei. Alexei's haemophilia was severe, and his mother grew desperate, even seeking the controversial help of the dark holy man Rasputin to save Queen Victoria's great-grandson. This, as we know now, was one of the matches that lit the Russian Revolution and eventually toppled the Russian royal family. Queen Victoria's first child, her daughter, Princess Victoria, went to agonizing lengths to make her mother proud and impress her, and she became an Empress of Prussia. Princess Victoria was able to rise very high, but her life ended with a giant crash. Victoria was born a disappointment. She was born to the young Queen and her husband Albert on the 21st of November, 1840. Queen Victoria had written in her letters that if the baby was born a girl, that she would drown the babe. So when she gave birth to her first child, who was a daughter, she was deeply disappointed. Even the doctor delivering the baby knew of the profound disappointment when he announced that the Queen had sadly had a girl. This was already a bad start, considering she wished for a boy immediately after birth, and when she said, "Don't worry, the next one will be a boy." When she grew up, she went on to have issues with her mother, Queen Victoria, and in a cruel twist of fate, as the year 1899 unfolded, Victoria embarked on a journey to Balmoral, seeking solace and the warmth of her mother's embrace. Little did she know that the path she treaded upon would lead her into the clutches of an insidious adversary, inoperable breast cancer. The diagnosis struck like lightning, shattering the fragile semblance of her well-being, leaving her grappling with the weight of her mortality. The veil of invincibility had been ripped away, exposing the vulnerability of a woman whose strength had weathered countless storms. From that moment forward, her life would forever be marked by the relentless grip of an unyielding foe. In her final days, Empress Frederick endured the relentless grip of her deteriorating health, grappling with the physical and emotional toll of her battle with inoperable breast cancer. The burden of her illness cast a shadow over her existence, shaping the landscape of her remaining moments. Confined to the confines of her bed, she experienced a profound frailty that contrasted sharply with the strength and vitality that she once possessed. Pain wrecked her body as cancer's relentless progression spread into tendrils, invading her once vibrant spirit. Yet even in the face of her suffering, she sought solace in simple pleasures. In the quiet morning she would summon the strength to rise, her weakened form finding respite in gentle walks, perhaps seeking a fleeting connection with the world beyond her chamber. Throughout the long hours that stretched ahead, she immersed herself in writing word, finding solace in letters penned to loved ones or escaping into realms of literature. The library of her castle became her sanctuary, a refuge from the harsh realities that encircled her. Within its hallowed walls she sought solace and embarked on intellectual journeys, losing herself in the pages that transported her beyond the confines of her ailing body. Yet even as she savoured these fleeting moments of respite, the spectre of mortality loomed ever closer. A weighty concern gripped her heart as she fretted over the future of Germany under the reign of her son. With great urgency she orchestrated a clandestine operation to safeguard her personal letters, ensuring their return to Great Britain, away from prying eyes and political repercussions. And so, as her final days unravelled, a complex tapestry of pain, reflection and fervent love surrounded Empress Frederick. Her spirit flickered in the fading light, clinging to the last parts of life, and on that fateful day of the 5th of August 1901, her battle came to an end, as the candle of her existence was extinguished, leaving behind a legacy etched in the annals of history. In her final years, Empress Frederick immersed herself in the world of art, frequenting the vibrant artist colony of Kronberg and forming a close bond with painter Norbert. Despite her declining health, she maintained a routine of morning walks and spent hours writing letters or indulging in reading within the castle's library. However, in late 1898, her world turned dark as doctors delivered the devastating news of inoperable breast cancer. Confined to her bed for prolonged periods, she faced the agony of the disease spreading to her spine by autumn of 1900. The breast cancer was inoperable, as the medical advancements and treatment options for cancer in the late 19th century were very limited compared to what is available today. Surgical removal of the affected tissue, such as a mastectomy, was one of the primary approaches at the time. However, the understanding of cancer and the effectiveness of treatments were not as advanced as they were now, and her battle with cancer took place during a time when cancer treatment options were very limited, and the disease was often difficult to manage. Her struggle with cancer and her subsequent passing highlight the challenges faced by individuals fighting the disease during that era. Fearing that her personal letters would fall into the wrong hands, particularly those expressing concerns about Germany's future under her son, she orchestrated an operation. Her godson Frederick Ponsonby retrieved the letters, covertly returning them to Great Britain. He later edited and provided commentary on the letters, ultimately publishing them in 1928. Tragically, on the 5th of August 1901, the Empress Dowager breathed her last breath, mere months after her mother's passing. She found her final resting place beside her husband in the Grand Royal Mausoleum in Potsdam. Adorning her tomb is a majestic marble effigy depicting her lying in eternal repose. Within the same hallowed grounds, her two deceased sons, Sigismund and Waldemar, rest alongside her. In a poignant display of reverence and mourning, the grand funeral of Empress Victoria unfolded, shrouded in sombre aura. The world stood witness to the solemn proceedings, compelled by the weight of her extraordinary life and untimely passing. The mausoleum in Potsdam became a sanctuary of sorrow, housing the royal mausoleum where the Empress Dowager's final resting place awaited. With bated breath the assembly gathered, family, dignitaries and mourners alike, united in their shared grief, paying homage to a remarkable woman. Within the hallowed walls the air grew heavy and heartache as the ceremony commenced. Enveloped in sacred rituals and religious rites, the Empress Dowager was laid to rest alongside her beloved husband and her cherished sons. Amidst the flickering candles and the scent of incense, the marble effigy of Empress Victoria stood as a silent witness to her eternal slumber, a poignant reminder of her enduring presence in the annals of history. Her passing left a giant void, a palpable absence felt by all who had known her spirit. Yet within the depths of their collective grief, the mourners found solace, cherishing her legacy and finding strength in the memories of her extraordinary life. Princess Victoria, the Princess Royal, had a significant legacy as a member of the British royal family. Her marriage to Crown Prince Frederick of Prussia strengthened ties between the British and German monarchies, and despite her declining health, she attended her mother Queen Victoria's funeral. Princess Victoria's philanthropic work, support of the arts and diplomatic role influenced European monarchies. Her advocacy for healthcare, education and social welfare positively impacted society, and her title, family connections and contributions to European history leave a lasting imprint. Princess Victoria's legacy is one of royal duty, cultural patronage, and a dedication to societal well-being. The tragic death of Princess Alice. In the depths of history, in 1843, a radiant being emerged into the world. Princess Alice, a precious jewel born into the majestic realm of the United Kingdom, was bestowed upon Queen Victoria and Prince Albert as their third celestial gift. In the embrace of their royal lineage, Alice joined her esteemed siblings, the illustrious Victoria, Princess Royal, and the future sovereign, the Prince of Wales. Alice had an insatiable thirst for understanding the essence of ordinary lives. She found solace in observing the ebb and flow of humanity. She delighted in the humble existence of the farmers, often venturing to Balmoral with her kin, nurturing her younger siblings and kindling her philanthropic spirit from an early age. Even in the throes of the Crimean War, at the tender age of 11, Alice graced the hospitals, bringing solace to the ailing soldiers. Her compassion only grew from there, in parallel with her own evolution. In the year of 1861, the cruel hand of fate snatched away Alice's beloved grandmother, Victoria, Duchess of Kent, and her beloved father, Prince Albert. These afflictions lingered, relentless and unforgiving, while Alice, the dutiful caregiver of her family, stood resolute at their sides. Queen Victoria, her heart aching, described dear Alice as brimming with boundless tenderness, affection and anguish for her. As Queen Victoria immersed herself in the abyss of mourning, Alice stepped forward, assuming the roles of secretary and representative for her mother alongside her sister Louise. In 1860, the Queen and her eldest daughter, Victoria, Princess Royal, embarked on a quest to find a suitable match for Alice. Though two esteemed royals were initially considered, their allure faded, and in the tapestry of destiny, a minor royal emerged as the chosen one, Prince Louis of Hesse, a nephew of the Grand Duke of Hesse. Queen Victoria embraced this union, and a mutual attraction blossomed between Alice and Louis. Despite the discrepancy in their stations, the match was deemed triumphant, for love often defies the boundaries of rank. The nuptials were conceived a year prior, before the breath of Prince Albert waned, yet the sombre pall of mourning still draped the court as the appointed day arrived, and those that attended were made to wear black attire. The Queen herself rarely emerged, and she was cloaked in seclusion. Nevertheless, the wedding persevered, honouring the desires that Prince Albert would held. On the 1st of July, 1862, within the intimate confines of Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, the couple exchanged vows, witnessed by a select few. Alice, entrusted to the tender guidance of her uncle Ernest, advanced towards her destiny, while Queen Victoria, overwhelmed by memories of her own jubilant past, concealed her emotions behind a screen. The Queen's voice resonated with a mournful timbre, likening the ceremony to a funeral. A fleeting glimpse of the wedding dress adorned Alice before she was made to give it up, swapping it for mourning attire. Alice and Louis, bounded by vows and destiny, embarked upon a new chapter in Darmstadt, nestled within the Grand Duchy of Hesse, beside the flowing Rhine. It was here, amidst a simpler existence, that they settled into an acquainted dwelling by the roadside. Their means were only modest. It was here that she threw herself into charity work and began to study art, and luckily Alice did not mind the drop in status, as she loved her new husband dearly. In the year 1863, the pair went on to have a daughter named Victoria, who drew her first breath in the embrace of England. As fate would have it, the Queen herself stood witness to this miracle, but her discerning eyes swiftly passed judgment upon Alice's desire to nurse her child. Over the next decade, the couple welcomed 6 more children into their family: daughters Irene, Elizabeth, Alex and Marie, and sons Frederick and Ernest. Alice was a mother steeped in devotion, and she balanced her nurturing role with tireless charity endeavours. Her pursuits centred on women causes, and in a remarkable turn of events, she took charge of the state military hospitals during the tumultuous Austro-Prussian War. These were very trying times for Alice, for Hesse aligned itself with Russia in the conflict, while her own sister held the title of Crown Princess of Prussia. The war's conclusion left Hesse bereft of both wealth and land, casting a dark shadow over Alice's cherished kin. It was in the year of 1873 when tragedy struck, which engulfed Alice and Louis in a shroud of despair. Their young son, Frederick, met an untimely demise, and his life was extinguished by a cruel grip of haemophilia, a curse passed down through their bloodline. Frederick's fall from a window proved to be a catalyst, yet it was an unrelenting torrent of blood that stole him away. Alice, consumed by grief, poured her heart into anguished letters addressed to her mother, seeking solace in their bond. But her pleas went unanswered, leaving her stranded in the desolation of her sorrow. Faced with this harrowing loss, Alice sought refuge in her charity work. She channeled her pain into housing reforms and social causes, blazing a trail of change throughout her lifetime. In the years to come, the union between Alice and Louis began to fray as she sought medical treatment in England. Her heart wrestled with a profound sense of isolation, and although their relationship teetered on uncertainty, they were thrust into unforeseen roles when in 1877 Louis ascended to the grandeur of Grand Duke of Hesse and Biarritz, and Alice in turn assumed the mantle of Grand Duchess. These newfound positions, born out of tragedy with the passing of Louis's father and elder brother, ushered them into uncharted territory. Despite the shock, the people of Hesse embraced Alice as their Grand Duchess, providing her with an outlet to pursue her reformist visions. Yet the weight of her responsibilities threatened to engulf her, overwhelming even the staunchest of hearts. Then in the bleak month of November 1878, a sinister force descended upon the Hessian abode, a merciless presence known as diphtheria. It snatched away the joys that had once filled their lives. The illness, which commenced as a common sore throat and fever, swiftly transformed into a remorseless killer. The infection spread like wildfire, catching the family in its grasp, leaving only Elizabeth untouched by its cruelty. Heartbreak struck once more when little Marie, a mere 4 years old, met her tragic end, choked by the merciless claws of fate. In an attempt to console her inconsolable son Ernest, who bore the weight of sorrow upon his young shoulders, Alice tenderly pressed her lips against his, seeking to put an end to his pain. But fate played a cruel game, deceiving all with a facade of wellness. Alice appeared unaffected by the insidious disease, even managing to share a precious moment with her sister Victoria, Princess Royal, who would journey to Darmstadt in early December. A sinister turn of events transpired. Alice herself succumbed to the illness that had stealthily taken hold of her fragile frame. Louis, stricken with despair, relayed the distressing news to Queen Victoria, who in her anguish dispatched her trusted physician, Sir William Jenner, to attend to her ailing daughter. By the 13th, the crushing verdict was delivered to Louis. There was no cure and no glimmer of hope. Alice's imminent demise loomed like an ominous spectre. As the following morning dawned, a chilling parallel part to the calendar. It was the anniversary of Prince Albert's passing, and at the fateful hour of 8:30 a.m., Alice departed this world, with her final words whispering, "Dear Papa." After her death, the Prime Minister at the time, Disraeli, spoke of the profound tragedy that befell Alice, drawing tears from the audience. "My lords," he began, his voice laden with sorrow, Her physicians, in their wisdom, had strictly forbidden any physical contact with her suffering family. Alice, ever the epitome of self-restraint, dutifully adhered to her instructions. However, when she broke the news of her youngest daughter's death to her beloved son, who clung to the cherished memory of his sister, overwhelmed with grief, the distraught mother clasped her child in her arms, sealing her own fate with a kiss of death. My lords, I can scarcely recall a more poignant moment. Queen Victoria, in a letter to her eldest daughter, poured out her anguished soul. My precious child, who stood by me and offered solace 17 years ago on this very day, has been taken from us by a fearful, dreadful disease. Her daughter, in response, penned her despair. Darling Alice, is it truly the case, so good and dear, enchanting and lovely, indispensable to her husband and children, universally adored and admired? I cannot comprehend it. The agony is too overwhelming, too cruel, too unfathomable. Princess Victoria, trapped by the dictates of her in-laws, was forbidden from attending her sister's funeral, lest she too fall victim to the ravages of illness. For the grieving queen the burden became unbearable, a daughter lost on the anniversary of her husband's passing. The newspapers overflowed with heartfelt messages of support and affection for Alice, who had forever been a princess of the people, treating all with utmost kindness. Even her sister-in-law, the Princess of Wales, formerly Alexandra of Denmark, who cherished her deeply, uttered the words of anguish, "I wish it had been me who perished instead of her." Alice found her final resting place in Darmstadt, where a monumental tribute still stands, commemorating her and her little Marie. Her mark on the world remained, through her extraordinary charitable endeavours, the institutions she founded, including women's training services and the Alice Hospital in Darmstadt, carrying forward her noble mission. In a tragic twist of fate, Alice's untimely demise shielded her from her further anguish. She was spared the witnessing of the heart-wrenching fate that awaited her daughters, Alex and Elizabeth, as they married into the Russian royal family, only to suffer cruel fates and meet their tragic ends, along with Alex's children, at the hands of the Bolsheviks in 1918. Nonetheless, Alex's lineage endures to this day, with her great-grandson, Prince Philip, and her great-great-grandson, Charles, who recently became king. The death of Princess Helena. Princess Helena, a member of the British royal family, faced personal losses during the Edwardian era following Queen Victoria's reign, with the deaths of her son, Prince Christian Victor, and her mother, Queen Victoria. She lived a quiet life with her husband, Christian, supported charitable causes, and maintained a close relationship with her nephew, Kaiser Wilhelm II, before passing away at the age of 77 in 1923. Her funeral was meticulously orchestrated, with King George V leading the procession, and she was initially interred in the Royal Vault at St George's Chapel, before being moved to the Royal Burial Ground at Frogmore in 1928, securing her lasting legacy within the British monarchy's history and traditions. Following Queen Victoria's reign, the Edwardian era began. During this period, Princess Helena faced significant personal losses. Her beloved son, Prince Christian Victor, passed away in 1900, and only 3 months later, her mother, Queen Victoria, also passed away at Osborne House on the 22nd of January 1901. The new monarch, Edward VII, had distant relationships with his surviving sisters, except for Princess Louise. Notably, Queen Alexandra harboured jealousy towards her sister-in-law and did not extend invitations to Sandringham. Alexandra also never fully forgave Helena and Christian for their marriage controversy in the 1860s. Helena found herself distanced from her surviving siblings and continued her role as a supporter of the monarchy and an advocate for numerous charitable causes. She and Christian lived a quiet life, but did fulfill some royal duties. On one occasion, they represented the king at the silver wedding anniversary of Kaiser Wilhelm II and Augusta Victoria in 1906. During this era, Helena made a poignant visit to the grave of her son, Prince Christian Victor, who had succumbed to malaria while serving in the Second Boer War in 1900. During this visit, she met South African Prime Minister Louise, though Jan Smuts declined to meet her, partly due to bitterness over South Africa's loss in the war and the personal tragedy of losing his son in a British concentration camp. In 1902, Prince and Princess Christian relocated to Schomberg House in London, which is now partly occupied by the Oxford and Cambridge Club. Before the outbreak of World War I, Helena was one of the few maternal relatives with whom her nephew Kaiser Wilhelm II had a close relationship. When Wilhelm welcomed his first child, he caused a family scandal by asking Helena, not his mother, to choose a nurse for his son. In her later years, King Edward passed away in 1910, and the First World War began 4 years later. Helena devoted herself to nursing, and requests for information about loved ones reached her and her sisters. The decision was made to forward these letters to Crown Princess Margaret of Sweden, since Sweden remained neutral during the war. In 1916, Helena and Christian celebrated their golden wedding anniversary, even though Britain and Germany were at war. The Kaiser sent a congratulatory telegram through the Crown Princess of Sweden, with King George V and Queen Mary present for the occasion. In 1917, as a response to the prevailing anti-German sentiment during the war, King George V changed the family name from Saxe-Coburg in Gotha to Windsor. He also renounced the family's German titles and styles, resulting in Helena and her daughters being known as Princess Christian, Princess Helena Victoria, and Princess Marie Louise, without territorial designations. Helena's surviving son, Albert, fought alongside the Prussians but declared that he would not fight against his mother's homeland. In the same year, on the 28th of October, Prince Christian passed away. Helena's final years were marked by disputes with commissioners who attempted to remove her from her home and Cumberland Lodge due to the expenses of maintaining her households. However, they failed as clear evidence of her right to reside in these residences for life was presented. On the 9th of June 1923, Princess Helena breathed her last at the venerable age of 77 within the confines of Schomberg House. Her passing marked the end of a life that had been closely entwined with the grand tapestry of the British royalty and history. Her departure from this world set the stage for a solemn and meticulously orchestrated funeral, a final act that would be etched in history as a magnificently stage-managed scene, as recounted by her biographer. At the helm of this poignant occasion was none other than King George V himself, leading the ceremonial procession to pay tribute to the departed princess. The regiment that held a special place in Helena's heart, the regiment of her cherished son, Prince Christian Victor, stood in formation, lining the hallowed steps of St. George's Chapel at the illustrious Windsor Castle. In the wake of her passing, the initial resting place chosen for Princess Helena was the Royal Vault at St. George's Chapel, where she was interred on the 15th of June 1923. This was a moment of closure and reflection, as the princess found her temporary repose amidst the distinguished company of other royal souls. However, a poignant chapter was yet to unfold in this tale of remembrance and veneration. It wasn't until the 23rd of October 1928, when the royal burial ground at Frogmore was consecrated, that the next chapter of Princess Helena's journey began. The ceremony marked the transition of her mortal remains to their final abode, a few miles from the historic Windsor. It was a moment that bridged time and memory, a testament to her enduring presence in the annals of British history. In the serene and picturesque surroundings of the royal burial ground, Princess Helena's legacy was laid to rest, ensuring that her memory would forever remain entwined with history and traditions of the British monarchy. The death of Princess Louise. During the Edwardian era after Queen Victoria's passing, Princess Louise found herself within the social circle of her brother, the new King Edward VII, who shared her love for smoking. Louise was passionate about physical fitness, and she would respond to critics by saying, "Never mind, I'll outlive you all." Meanwhile, her husband, the 9th Duke of Argyll, who assumed his position in 1900, took his seat in the House of Lords. In 1900, the Colonel's secretary, Joseph Chamberlain, offered him the role of Governor-General of Australia, which he declined. During this time, Louise continued her sculpting and designed a memorial in 1902 to honour Colonel's soldiers who perished in the Boer War. In the same year, she embarked on a nude study of married women upon the suggestion of the English painter Sir William Blake Richmond. Louise spent a significant amount of her time at Kent House and frequently visited Scotland with her husband. Financial constraints were still present even after Lorne became the Duke, leading Louise to refrain from inviting the King to Inverness, Argyll's ancestral home, due to the couple's need for economising. When Queen Victoria had visited the house before Lorne became Duke of Argyll, there were 70 servants and 74 dogs. By the time of Edward VII's reign, there were only 4 servants and 2 dogs. The Duke of Argyll's health deteriorated, and he became increasingly senile. Louise cared for him diligently from 1911 onwards. In these years, Louise and her husband grew closer than ever before. In spring 1914, Louise stayed at Kensington Palace while her husband remained on the Isle of Wight. Unfortunately, he developed bronchial problems, followed by double pneumonia. Louise was summoned on the 28th of April 1914, and he passed away on the 2nd of May. Following his death, Louise experienced a nervous breakdown and intense loneliness, writing to a friend shortly afterwards, "My loneliness without the Duke is quite terrible. I wonder what he does now." In her later years, Louise resided at Kensington Palace, where she occupied rooms next to her sister, Princess Beatrice. She made occasional public appearances with the royal family, such as at the Cenotaph at Whitehall on November 11, 1925. However, her health declined. In 1935, she greeted her nephew, King George V, and his wife, Queen Mary, at Kensington Town Hall during their Silver Jubilee celebrations, and was made an honorary Freeman of the Borough of Kensington. Her final public appearance occurred in 1937 at the Home Arts and Industries exhibition. Between these events, her great-nephew, King Edward VIII, abdicated on the 11th of December 1936. In December 1936, Louise wrote to the British Prime Minister, Stanley Baldwin, expressing sympathy for him during the crisis. Following the accession of Edward's brother, King George VI, Louise's health deteriorated further, confining her to Kensington Palace, fondly referred to as the Auntie Palace by Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret. She suffered from neuritis in her arm, inflammation of the nerves between the ribs, fainting fits, and sciatica. During this time, Louise kept herself occupied by drafting prayers, one of which was sent to Neville Chamberlain, reading, "Guide our ministers of state and all who are in authority over us." The passing of Princess Louise marked a solemn moment in British royal history, occurring on the quiet morning of the 3rd of December 1939. She had reached a remarkable age of 91, having carried with her the weight of nearly 7 decades of life experiences, all while donning the very wedding veil that had adorned her head on her wedding day, nearly 70 years earlier. The circumstances surrounding her final farewell were anything but ordinary, as the tumultuous backdrop of World War II influenced the proceedings. In recognition of the war, a simple funeral service was held in her honour. The shadow of conflict hung heavily over the land, prompting a modest and understated ceremony befitting the times. Despite the challenges and constraints imposed by the global conflict, the solemn occasion was not diminished. As the war raged on, Princess Louise remains underwent a process of cremation at the Golders Green Crematorium on the 8th of December 1939. This decision resonated with the practicality and efficiency called for during wartime, as it minimized the burden on resources and logistics that a traditional burial might have demanded. The final resting place of this beloved royal figure was a subject of careful consideration, given her personal preferences and circumstances. Louise's will contained a clear and poignant directive, specifying that her burial location depended on the place of her death. If she were to pass away in Scotland, her wish was to be laid to rest at the Campbell Mausoleum in Gilman, alongside her cherished husband. However, if fates decreed her end in England, she desired to be reunited with her parents at Frogmore, a place of familial significance. On the 12th of December 1939, Princess Louise's ashes were quietly interred in the Royal Vault at St George's Chapel. The event drew the presence of numerous members of the British royal family and her own Argyll family, who gathered to pay their respects and bid their final farewells. A few months later, on the 13th of March 1940, Princess Louise's ashes were relocated to the royal burial ground at Frogmore, situated near the regal backdrop of Windsor. This tranquil resting place, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the serenity of the royal landscape, was a fitting choice for a princess whose life had been defined by an enduring connection to the royal family. The ceremonial duties were carried out with the utmost respect and care, with her coffin being borne by 8 non-commissioned officers from her own regiment, the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. This tribute acknowledged her long-standing ties to the regiment and added a military touch to the proceedings, reflecting her own deep-rooted connections with the military. In her passing, Princess Louise left an estate that was not only a testament to her lifetime, but also a reflection of the times. Her estate was probated of £239,260, 18 shillings and sixpence, a substantial sum that showcased her financial standing. Remarkably, her debts, a rather insignificant 15 shillings for cigarettes, provided a curious footnote to her financial matters. In total, Princess Louise's passing was a poignant and historical moment, marked by simplicity, respect, and a testament to the changing world around her. The death of Princess Beatrice. Princess Beatrice lived a dynamic life in her later years, maintaining active connections and making occasional public appearances even in her 70s. She completed her last translation project in 1941, translating the diary of Queen Victoria's maternal grandmother, Augustus, Duchess of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, displaying her enduring dedication to literature. Beatrice excelled in various fields such as acting, dancing, art and photography, and her loyalty and sense of humour endeared her to her friends. Despite her personal challenges, she fulfilled demanding responsibilities during her mother's reign, enduring rheumatism and showcasing unwavering dedication to Queen Victoria. Her life concluded at Brantridge Park, the residence of her niece, Princess Alice, and her husband, the Earl of Athlone, in Canada, while her legacy lives on at Osborne House, her mother's cherished home. Beatrice, the most reserved among Queen Victoria's children, overcame her shyness and emerged as one of the most recognisable figures due to her constant presence alongside her mother. Beyond her retinence, she displayed remarkable talents in acting, dancing, artistry and photography. Her dedication to her children was evident through her concern when they occasionally misbehaved at school. Those fortunate enough to be her friends cherished her loyalty and sense of humour, while as a public figure, her unwavering commitment to duty was unmistakable. A notable aspect of her life was her role as the patron of the Isle of Wight branch of the Royal National Lifeboat Institution from 1920 until her passing. Music, a shared passion with her parents, Queen Victoria and the Prince Consort, was an arena where Beatrice excelled. Her piano skills were at a professional level, and she occasionally dabbled in composition. Like her mother, she held strong religious convictions and remained engrossed in theology until her final days. Her calm disposition and warm personality endeared her to a wide audience. Despite her personal challenges, Beatrice endured significant demands during her mother's reign. She coped with rheumatism even in the face of Queen Victoria's presence for colder climates. Regrettably, her rheumatism took a toll on her piano playing, a source of great joy for her. Nonetheless, she continued to selflessly cater to her mother's needs, a fact not lost on the British public. In 1886, when she accepted the role of opening the Royal Horticultural Society of Southampton's show, the organisers conveyed their profound gratitude for her unwavering support and comfort to their widowed mother, the Queen. As a wedding gift, Sir Moses Montefiore, a banker and philanthropist, presented Beatrice and Henry with a silver tea service inscribed with the words, "Many daughters have acted virtuously, but thou excellest them all." The Times newspaper shortly before Beatrice's marriage praised her dedication to the Queen, implying a critical tone toward the Queen's influence over her daughter. Her life came to a close at Bruntrige Park, the residence of her niece Princess Alice and Alice's husband, the Earl of Athlone, who was then serving as the Governor-General of Canada. Osborne House, her mother's beloved residence, remains accessible to the public. The Osborne properties, Osborne and Albert Cottages, were sold in 1912 and are now privately owned. In her later years, Princess Beatrice led a remarkable life filled with various activities and connections. Even as she entered her 70s, she maintained an active correspondence with her friends and relatives. On rare occasions, she would make public appearances, such as the poignant moment where she, seated in a wheelchair, observed the wreaths laid in tribute to King George V after his passing in 1936. Notably, in 1941, Princess Beatrice undertook her final translation project, a significant literary endeavour titled Napoleonic Days. This work involved the translation of the personal diary of Augusta, Duchess of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, who was Queen Victoria's maternal grandmother. The project garnered the approval and admiration of the publisher John Murray, reflecting her enduring dedication to the world of literature. Her last residence was at Bruntrige Park in West Sussex, a property owned by her niece Princess Alice and Princess Alice's husband, Alexandra Cambridge, the first Earl of Athlone. At the time, the Athlones were residing in Canada, where the Earl served as Governor-General. It was at Bruntrige Park that Princess Beatrice peacefully passed away in her sleep on the 26th of October 1944, at the age of 87. Interestingly, this date was just one day shy of the 30th anniversary of her son, Prince Maurice's passing. Following her death, a funeral service was held in St George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. Her coffin was subsequently interred in the Royal Vault on the 3rd of November. Then, on the 27th of August 1945, her remains were moved to a shared resting place next to her husband in St Mildred's Church in Whippingham. The final resting place was in line with her expressed desire to be buried alongside her husband on the island that held the most significance for her. The interment occurred in a private ceremony, attended solely by her son, the Marquis of Carisbrooke, and his wife. This heartfelt tribute honoured the enduring legacy of Princess Beatrice's remarkable life.